are going to go ahead and get started. The very first thing that I wanted to do was just to make sure in the shuffle we didn't miss anyone who had filled out a sheet for the solution slam. So I'm going to read out the names that we have. If you already filled out a sheet and your name is not on this list, if you could please make your way over to Lillian Chase right there. She's waving her hand. And you can just kind of like squat down, let her know your name so she can add you to the list for the slam. So we have Mason Lord, Molly Howard, Megs Staloff, Corinne Colbert, Andrew Button, Andrew Tucker, Helen Joy George, Gail Summers, Rod Sakio, and Lindsay Young. Was there any we missed? All right, Jules, if you want to take your stuff over to Lily, that would be great. She can get you added. All right, awesome. So now that we have that out of the way, okay, so I'd like to just make a couple comments about yesterday because I felt like yesterday was just magical. One of the things that just made me laugh was that I know that we are among organizers, that probably just about everyone in this room and everyone who attends Radically Rural does some sort of organizing in their life, whether it's events or workshops or runs an organization, whatever it is. It's just very clear that we're among organizers because I see people passing me and they're giving me that look like, you got this, you're doing great, or like people coming up to me and saying things that only organizers would say. And it's just brought a lot of warmth to my heart. Another example is yesterday at Connect, we had a letter writing station as one of our interactive installations. And we had some of the sweetest letters and submissions to the Sentinel. And another example of the fact that we're among organizers is they were often written as if they were writing a press release for us. They quoted themselves. They even started it with the location and all of that and ended it, with that little hash marks and all of that. So it made me smile as I was typing them up. I'll read one of them. Keene, New Hampshire. The vibe was fantastic at the first day of the Radically Rural convening, a space where it is not only cool but encouraged to show one's love for rural. Attendees connected, shared, laughed, and cried together over the new learnings, shared experiences, and shifts in perspective. Here's the quote. How wonderful to be invited to this table of rural enthusiasts who are Sarah, finding solutions to these current issues, said Sarah Green, co-director of the Kansas Sampler Foundation based in Inman, Kansas. The energy in this space is contagious and inspiring. Participants noted their anticipation and excitement for the second day of the convening and going home energized to continue to make a difference where they live. Thank you for submitting that, Sarah. Also, the postcards were amazing. I just want to note that 3 of them were addressed to their moms. Is that not adorable? And lastly, how amazing is it that we have this waiting for us this morning? Thank you, thank you, thank you, Keene Sentinel and Franklin Pierce students. So the students and professor at Franklin Pierce University worked to collect and write the stories Terry Williams edited. I know that from his bleary eyes this morning. I was actually able to stop by for the first time in the 3 years that I've run this summit to actually see them in action. And, I don't know what I expected, from the movies, but it was different. It was still super cool. I was like, how's everybody doing? And they're like, good. We're just typing away and eating pizza. So it was great. And I hope that everyone gets a chance to read this and enjoy it. All right. So we have a jam-packed session today, so I'll only briefly bring your attention to the lunchtime activities we have going on today. So Railroad Square, which is where the bus left from yesterday, and it's right next to Local Burger, right across the street to the left from here. Stop by there anytime today to use found objects to build your favorite childhood memory at our Dream Play Build pop-up. How many of you have heard of Dream Play Build? Some of you? Okay. The Dream Play Build method was originally trialed by James Rojas and John Camp. The volunteers who are running the pop-up, Jessica Hag and Brandon Latham, are you here this morning? They might be setting up. Oh, there you are. They're doing a version of this in their own community called Our Neighborhood, Our Future. The news has been filled recently with the value of play for adults, and this model builds on playfulness and childhood memories to connect with our core values. Sharing those core values is an essential step toward building communities and places that embody who we are, who we want to be, and how we want to live. Because the future of our communities is often discussed and decided in settings that are intimidating, uncomfortable, uninspiring, and not fully accessible or inclusive, we end up getting boxed into the same old ideas. The alternative approach grants permission for imagining and dreaming, and we hope you'll try it here and take it home with you. The majority of the stuff was literally just laying around my house or at my town transfer station, so anyone can do this. It only takes 5 minutes to build a memory. We'll collect the results and send them out to everyone afterward. What makes it even more fun is that if you stop by during lunchtime, you can build while you enjoy listening to live music by the Calliope Brothers Contra Dance Band. And now we have another poem. Earlier this year, Andy Pressman with National Center for Appropriate Technologies, an organization that has sponsored Radically Rural the last 2 years, reached out to me about having a session on agrarianism to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the book, Small is Beautiful, by E.F. Schumacher. Schumacher's book was pivotal in making the case to support rural economies and was instrumental in getting NCAT started as it focused on appropriate technologies to support rural and local communities. That session occurred yesterday. I heard great things about it. And one of the speakers was Dr. Leah Bayens, who is the Dean of the Wendell Berry Farming Program of Sterling College. She offered to read some of Mr. Berry's work, and we welcomed that. Please welcome Dr. Leah now.
Good morning. It's really my pleasure to be with you all. I'm deeply grateful to Juliana and crew for their deliberate and thoughtful planning and their attention to detail, and ultimately for providing a much-needed platform for cooperation amongst rural community members, as well as those advocates who hitch together the health of our countryside and the health of our urban neighbors. So as Juliana mentioned, I am affiliated with Wendell Berry and his family. I work for the Berry Center. We have recently morphed the Wendell Berry Farming Program into actually a project we're super excited about called the Farm and Forest Institute of the Berry Center. And as a piece of the Berry Center's work that's in Henry County, Kentucky, my friends and colleagues in our home place are working every single day to support farmers and land-conserving communities and healthy regional economies. As yesterday's keynote speakers attested, it's really easy to list out the losses and the gaps that are resulting from outmigration and political divides and economic decline. But, you know, it's a heck of a lot more valuable, not to mention more fun, to figure out what we have to work with and how we want our people, our land, and our communities to thrive. So in our rural places, we can begin by taking stock, by asking and then spending a lifetime answering a list of questions that are really central to the Berry Center's work, which is what has happened here, what should have happened here, what's here now, and what will nature help us do here. So Wendell Berry poses these questions in an essay called A Major in Homecoming, which I encourage you to check out. And this is really a starting point for taking hold of the saving remnants of our places, the cultures of thrift and neighborliness and cooperation, for instance, and using these to strengthen our communities. So as champions of the small places, all the hollers and the nooks and crannies across our countryside, as I know you are, I think the folks in this room are really getting a hold of those saving remnants. And in effect saying, yes, we have hard histories, we take stock of the roots of racism and classism and sexism, and as Wendell Berry puts it, of the inordinate desire to be superior, and we're learning from our mistakes so we can build resilient, inclusive, and diverse communities. This, it seems to me, is our path to cultivating neighborly leaders and cooperative economies. This is our hope, which is not the assurance that things are going to turn out right, but that we're doing the right thing in front of us to do. So yesterday I was really struck by keynote speaker Gloria Dickerson's words, "Without hope, there is no strategy," and I couldn't ask for a better preamble for this poem by Wendell Berry, which is titled Work Song Part 2 of Vision. If we will have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it, if we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or heaven, then a long time after we are dead, the lives our lives prepare will live here. Their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens rich in their windows. The river will run clear as we will never know it, and over it birdsong like a canopy. On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells in noon shade. On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest, an old forest will stand, its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots. The veins of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields. In their voices, they will hear a music risen out of the ground. They will take nothing from the ground, they will not return, whatever the grief at parting. Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a grove, and memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into sacrament. The abundance of this place, the songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and indwelling light. This is no paradisal dream. Its hardship is its reality. Thanks.
That was beautiful, thank you. I will now welcome to the stage Duck Liu, Director of Sustainability Initiatives for Journalism from the Knight Foundation, to tell us a little about the work of the Knight Foundation in supporting rural journalism, since they are a Radical Level sponsor this year. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. And my name is Duck Liu. I'm one of the program directors at Knight Foundation working on our journalism team. And we are so honored to be a part of this event and to help support the attendance of more than 20 journalists, community journalists who are attending right now. Are there any in the audience? I'd love to, if you can raise your hand. Oh, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to them. Thank you so much for attending. So it's really hard to follow a poem, so let me start with a story. And let me take everyone back all the way to a distant time ago in the winter of 2019. 2019, I was appointed the publisher for the Washington City paper, the local alternative weekly for the DC area. So I ran a newspaper. And this newspaper, the legacy of it continues to weigh on me every single day. The likes of Jake Tapper, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Kara Swisher have walked through those doors, David Carr, and ran this thing and made it what it was. And here I was, this young gun, appointed to lead this paper and the people that were a part of it and depended on me as a publisher to keep it going. And we did a phenomenal job. For the first time in our history, this paper in the winter of 2019 made money, which was a radical concept. We made money because we went out and we got community anchors like Capital One to put on big sponsored content deals with us. We got our existing advertisers to come back and come in for bigger deals. And it was great. Going into 2020, this young publisher thought, 2020 is going to be amazing. We have runway as far as the eye can see. And I was right up until about March 15th of 2020, when the bottom fell out. And every single call I was taking was from an advertiser, one or the other, saying, we're going to pause our advertising just for a couple of weeks. It'll just be for a couple of weeks. We'll ride this out. Everything's closed anyways. Take a break. I'm like, okay. We'll make it through. The end of the quarter will be just fine into March. And there we were, and we weren't fine. And this print newspaper that relied on, for its 40-year history, on print advertising, probably about 95% of our revenues, 99% of our revenues are coming from advertising, and of that 99%, probably about 75 to 80% was print advertising. It was all gone. So what did we have to do? How do we make it through and keep these people employed and keep the news being reported so that the people of Washington, D.C. could be served? And so in our 40-year history, we had never asked for a single dollar of reader revenue, and we built a reader revenue from scratch. And by the end of my tenure in the winter of 2021, we had more than 2,000 people in Washington, D.C. paying, on average, more than $100 a year in order to support this community institution, this community newspaper that they thought was important and relevant to their lives and their community. And just a sense of what the numbers were, that ended up being more than 20% of the overall revenue pie. I wish it was because of how big it was, but mainly it's because of how much print advertising had continued to contract over those years. And in addition to reader revenue, for the first time in our history, we got revenues from philanthropy, from places like the American Press Institute, the Solutions Journalism Network, the Facebook Journalism Project, rest in peace, Google News Initiative, and Knight Foundation, which is what leads me to where I am today. And at Knight Foundation, we are so proud to support the local journalism ecosystem in the service of informed and engaged communities. And just hearing some of the sessions yesterday, many of the organizations that we've been proud to support over decades and decades, from the tools and technologies like NewsPack that many rural publishers are using in order to get their news out on websites to their readers, to the technology tools like News Revenue Hub and Blue Lena that, again, many publishers are using in order to build reader revenue programs. To trade and membership associations like the Institute of Nonprofit News, the local independent online news associations, and Radically Rural that convene and bring people together from across the country in order to give us the strength in the community to forge ahead with what we're trying to do for our towns. To the legal and supporting organizations like the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press that every day is fighting for the rights of local reporters in places like Marion County, Kansas. But I want to say that it's certainly not enough, not by far, because there are two unassailable facts about what we see in media today. One unassailable fact is that for the past 25 years, the local news ecosystem has been in a bear market. From the dot-com bust to the rise of the social media companies eating everyone's lunches, to the great financial crisis, to the pandemic itself. Each one of them has marked a lower low when it comes to what people's expectations are of what local news can be and what local news can do. And the other unassailable fact is that in your lived experiences, I guarantee you that if you ask people in your lives how they feel about the state of news and information right now, they would tell you they are inundated. They feel overwhelmed. They would ask you, what are you talking about? When you tell them, like, there's not enough of the information that they need out there. They're flooded with it, from their social media pages to every time they turn on the TV, and we're flooded with information. And so no one is aware of what's happening. And these two things I describe, the hollowing out of local media at the same time as being filled with all these other kinds of news and information, and I describe it and liken it to air and water pollution. It happens very, very slowly. It seeps in, and then one day we look around us, and all of a sudden we can't drink the water anymore because it's overwhelmed. And so when I say that it's not enough, what Knight has been doing, I'm really proud to announce, or well, not announce, I'm proud to talk about Press Forward, which is a group of funders from across the country that have been coming together in order to create a fund of more than $500 million with the goal to raise $1 billion to support the local journalism ecosystem, because how important it is to informing and engaging communities across the United States. We're going to make investments over the next 5 years into local journalism in order to ensure that it can continue to serve local communities like Keene. And I think it's going to be a great way in order to ensure that communities are healthy, because without healthy information ecosystems, I really don't know how we're going to go about solving many of the challenges that we're talking about right here. So. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. All right. You're in for a real treat right now. So this year, we have decided to have a cash prize to support the projects and ideas of rural folks. So you might have known we had the Livability Slam before, which were short videos, but we understood that was a barrier to hear great ideas. So we're trying something new this year. But I knew when we wanted a cash prize, I really wanted it sponsored by a business that I felt like really represented the easy, replicable, well, not necessarily easy, but replicable, tangible ideas that anyone in this room could replicate. And I feel like we really did that with Good Fortune Pawn Shop. They have a small pantry right outside their store that folks leave non-perishable items for anyone who need them to take them. It's just a way via mutual aid to help fellow humans. It's so simple yet powerfully exhibits how we care for each other. And there's more work they do in the community as well. So I'm gonna welcome Roger Weinrich to the stage. And he did assure me that when you inevitably give him a standing ovation at the end, he knows that we're short on time, so he will just exit. So don't get your hopes up about him coming back after your standing ovation. Welcome, Roger.
So I'm going to talk really fast. You might understand what I'm saying, but that's okay, but I'll slow down a little. So one, thanks for listening, because you're going to listen, I guess, I hope. So my name is Roger. My family runs Good Fortune Jewelry and Pawn across the street. We're a 32-year-old business, and we're essentially a financial service company disguised as a retail store. My wife and I started the business for a number of reasons. One was we wanted to have a place where our kids could find us after work, or after school, rather, because some of our parents in the world were all over the world. So we thought, well, that'll be fun if they see what we do. At the same time, we wanted a business where people could come in and leave, and when they left, they would actually feel better than when they came in. And they didn't have to buy something, and it wasn't that we were going to hug them all and give them money and be therapists to everybody, but we kind of wanted that as a focal point. So we choose to have it be a team-run business. So everyone actually is in a leadership position who works there, and you can come meet us if you want during lunch. And the other thing is we wanted to provide some kind of financial service for people. So, and kind of in anticipation of a changing and growing world, we thought, okay, what could we do? So we thought, well, let's do a resale business like a consignment store. But they were typically clothes and furniture, so let's do consignment of everything we can think of. So we began to sell coffee mugs on consignment, jet skis, toaster ovens, dishwashers, anything people could haul in, building materials. And in the 5,000 square foot store, we turned over a lot of things. But one thing we could never sell was jewelry. And we would be able to sell antique vintage estate jewelry all day long. There were plenty of people that collected that, but nobody would ever buy a diamond ring that was a day old or a month or a week old. We were really puzzled about that because we didn't like to say no to our consigners, like we can't take that. So we began to, in earnest, learn about the jewelry industry and have since basically turned most of our consignments into jewelry consignments. So we're one of the largest, if not the largest, jewelry consignment store in the US. And the reason we got into the jewelry was because, and I'll give you this quick example. When you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, they tell you, well, it depreciates 20% right away because it's used. If you drive it back, the dealer, if you bought it for $30,000, he might give you $25,000. When people walk out of a jewelry store, it depreciates between 20 to 80%, and the jeweler typically won't buy it back. They'll trade you back in towards something of greater value. There are a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into that right now, but in the jewelry industry, the markup is fairly high, but it's been coming down as people and consumers learn more about pricing via internet, et cetera. And the good thing about jewelry in a pre-owned marketplace is it retains wholesale value because it's intrinsically a metal, gold, platinum, or silver. So when somebody buys a piece of used jewelry, it's a slightly better investment than a guitar or a TV, things that will depreciate. The jewelry will hold value, and in this case, it escalates a little. So anyway, that's one part of our business. The other part that around the same time it happened, people were coming in looking for loans. They thought we were a pawn shop. Well, we didn't quite know what a pawn shop was, so basically, we started a pawn shop, but we did a crowdsourced funding program about 30 years ago to see if anybody in the community wanted to be part of it. So we're basically a community pawn shop in the sense that the money we're lending out to people is coming from people who live right here. And in that sense, it works really nicely because people are involved locally making loans to people that they don't even know. So there's a level of anonymity. And just to give you a nutshell picture of the pawn shop business, it predates the banking business by about 3,000 years. Pawn shops basically make collateral loans. So just like a bank uses the house to secure the mortgage or a car to secure a lien on a car loan, we have a piece of personal property of the person who's borrowing. It could be a piece of jewelry, it could be a guitar. We do loans to contractors, so we have off-site stored skid steers and machinery. Everything that people loan on is secured in the basement. Nobody sees or touches it. It's a 1-month loan. They come back after the month, pay us back the loan, plus a 15% fee or less, and pick it up. The redeem rate's about 100%, so people don't leave things at pawn shops. Things you see at pawn shops typically are items that the pawnbrokers buy to resell. Also in the service part of it, it's important for me to say a little bit about the pawn industry. It's a little bit misunderstood. Pawn shops don't buy stolen property because we actually photograph people, do an extensive check, let's say, on them, and that precludes the bad guys, quote, coming in. Also, a third of the pawn shops in the US are run and owned by women. So that's a little bit about the pawn shop. Back to good fortune, what we found now is the circulating of money within a community with local products is really great. So lots of our jewelry does come from other areas where people don't have a consignment jewelry store, but in Keene, this area, all the jewelry we sell is locally owned, even if it was made or manufactured in China. So the money from the sale goes back to the person. So we basically circulate millions of dollars within the community. And that's our in-store focus. Our out-store focus are different projects that kind of can replicate themselves easily. So Juliana mentioned the blessing box. We also call it the sharing box, but very simple idea. It's just taking that book idea where people have books out for lending, and in it there's food. And what's great about it is it gets turned over super fast. It gives people the opportunity to donate food who might never do it. Like at our box, there's some little girls who come by every day and put in like chocolate. They say like people need sweets, right? So it's just fun to see people taking things too and feeling comfortable on all levels. Even though we don't circulate as much food as the local pantry, it's just a great opportunity for people to share with each other. We have another blessing box up at the library, which is in slightly better shape. Ours needs to be recoded again, just got a graffiti tag. But I wanted to mention that because that's an idea that we put forward in the world, so you'll see a little sign on it. So if you know anybody or community who wants one, just let us know. So it's something that we can do that's super cost effective on how it distributes food, but mostly how it gets people to interact with each other. So thank you very much. Have a great program, and I'll see you later.
Oh, standing ovation, that's what I thought. All right, so now I'm gonna welcome to the stage fellow Radically Rural Planning team members, Julie Chazelle. Lily, you got the couch, you've got the yellow chair, there you go. Julie Chazelle and Lily Chase. I invited them with me just so we can make this fun and casual for the slam. So I'm gonna make my way over to this seat. This living room set may or may not have come from my house. All right, Drew, Kate, where are you in the audience? All right, head back there to the tech team. They're gonna give you the mic, okay? All the way back there. So my daughter, Drew Kate, is going to be running the mic to everyone who's going to be giving their 1-minute pitches. Now, how do you know whether your 1 minute is up? Well, I will tell you. Julie here has her phone. And when there's 10 seconds left, she's gonna count down with her fingers. Now you better beware, because once she gets to 0, we'll start making obnoxious noises, and nobody wants that. So, I haven't even practiced my noises, so you don't know what's gonna come out. So, wrap it on up. We don't wanna be late. We wanna make sure everyone gets to their sessions at the right time. We'll have a little commentary while Drew Kate's running around the mic between folks, but otherwise, we're just gonna go for it. So, Lily, grab your mic and you say the name of the person and the state where they're pitching from.
Alrighty. So we're starting with Lindsay Young from Kansas.
My name is Lindsay Young. My husband and I own 3 community newspapers in South Central Kansas. And one of the big issues that we ran into as a state is that it is really hard to recruit journalists to small communities. And so the solution that we came up with was, as a former teacher, I developed a course called Earn Your Press Pass. You can check it out at earnyourpresspass.com. And we've been kind of trying to sell it to different press associations around the country to basically take community members, people who already are in your community, and train them to be able to do good journalism and ethical journalism, to be able to then come into those newsrooms and work. And so we've really trying to make this a way to sustain journalism in rural communities and be able to actually have, like, journalists at the back of the room in meetings and, covering their communities. And so that is our goal, is to continue to get Earn Your Press Pass in as many hands as we can around the country.
Woo! She did it! That was incredible. What an amazing model to get this started with. And I love how you directed that to everyone else. I love that. And so what I'm realizing is that you're not going to be able to see Julie. And so I'm going to depend on all of you. When you see Julie holding up her hands, and counting down, feel free to hold yours up and count down with her. All right. Next name, Lily.
Emily Sherwood from New Hampshire.
I live in Marlow, New Hampshire, 30 minutes north of here, a tiny town. I'm at the dead end of a dirt road, and we like our space. Our neighbors, everybody wants to be in their own space. We epitomize that frugal, live free or die attitude in this area, but we do have a few things in common, and the big thing is food. We all like to grow our own food. We take pride in it. We have an informal lending library. We know who has the smoker, who has the meat grinder, who has the pressure canner, who has the stock pot, and we call on each other when we need them. What we don't have is a purpose-built community food processing space. We need a literal and proverbial table to gather around. We need equipment storage. We need food storage. Our root cellars don't work in a time of climate change. We need stainless steel tables, we need running water, we need energy-efficient walk-in cooler and freezer. We need a new idea of a food bank.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love that. Lily?
Next up, Gail Summers, also from here in New Hampshire.
Awesome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gail Somers, and I own Yasso Jamaican Grill, located right here on Main Street. And I am a Keene resident, have been a Keene resident for the last 10 years. And the issue I'd like to address this morning is one of sustainability. I do believe that as much as I'm proud to call Keene home, it doesn't always feel the same for everyone, especially people that look like me. I'm an immigrant from Jamaica. And again, I'm proud to call Keene home, but I'd like to address the issue of sustainability as it relates to cultural inclusion and cultural celebration and seeing the life of historically marginalized people. The solution is the Keene Multicultural Center. So reimagine a center right here on Main Street that celebrates culture, that's advancing and enhancing the life of new Americans, that leverages arts and culture, and be able to impact services and support to that community.
Amazing. Thank you, Gail. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Gail, also for offering 15 and 15. So we have a couple of restaurants in the area that are offering food for $15 or less in 15 minutes or less for our Radically Rural attendees, so you can get something quickly on the go. So Yasso Jamaican Grill, visit there for 15 and 15. Thank you, Gail. All right, Lily, here we go.
Next up, Helen Joy George, a wonderful photographer from North Carolina.
Drew Kate, you gotta let her go.
I'm Helen Joy George. I'm from Saluda, North Carolina, in the western area of North Carolina. I am in the beginning stages of opening a place called The Gathering Place. It's going to be a photo studio and creative gathering space for our locals. The problem that I saw was that we have shifted to gatherings pretty much around breweries and drinking, and I saw a big need for something else for people who maybe don't want to focus on that being the center of gathering. And also I saw a big need among people who wanted to get creative but felt like they didn't know how. So it was inspired by Radically Rural, actually, and just trying to bring a little bit of that feeling home.
I love to hear that it was inspired by Radically Rural. And I've also, if any of you are familiar, or from New Hampshire, there was also Remix Coffee Club, I think in Claremont, that had a similar idea of gathering folks with, non-alcoholic options for places to be at nighttime. So awesome. Go ahead, Lily.
Next up, Andrew Tucker from Ohio.
All right, Andrew, raise your hand. So Drew Kate, there you are.
Hi, good morning. My name's Andrew Tucker from Ohio, and I am representing the Ohio University Innovation Center. And what I see a lot is I'm in the science, biotech field, and a lot of people in science and tech have a great idea, but they don't have the money, the space, the equipment, or the know-how resources that they need to go further than just that idea. And our goal really is to help entrepreneurs with all those hurdles so that they can just focus on their idea and do their work, which is really the important part and what they want to do. So we offer business coaching. It includes grant applications and navigating all that, advising, amongst other things. And we offer regulatory affairs coaching to help navigate all the federal and state regulations. That's actually a big part of my job. And we have fully equipped what's called BSL-2 labs, so they can do all their work in these lab spaces.
Beep, 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 beep,
Okay.
beep, beep, beep.
All these solutions allow entrepreneurs to make their ideas come to life.
You guys are lucky. I went easy on you. I know. Come on, people. Put those hands up when it's time. Drew Kate, you're doing an excellent job. Thank you. Favorite human on the planet, right there. But don't tell your sisters. All right, go ahead. Next name.
Next up, Andrew Button from Canada.
Andrew.
Awesome. Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Button. I'm founder and CEO of Mashup Lab, and I spent 15 years in rural economic development before starting Mashup Lab, and we were doing all the things. We had training programs, innovation centers, incubators, mentor programs, but what we learned was that for every one person that we were working with, there were actually 7 other people sitting on the sidelines in our community, not plugging into all of those supports and programs we built for them. So we designed a solution to get all of that untapped talent off the sidelines and into the game. And over the last 36 months, we've now helped 400 people start companies in over 300 communities across Canada and the US. 80% of those folks have never signed up for a business or entrepreneurship program ever before, despite having dozens of things available to them. So we're now looking for 20 communities here in rural America to see if we can replicate those results. I just posted my contact details on the wall, so feel free to check out that if you're interested in exploring that opportunity with me. Great. Thanks, everyone.
You guys are doing so great. Thank you so much. Next name, Lily.
Mason Lord from Connecticut.
All right.
I am the founder of a workforce development initiative called Touch a Trade. The issue is twofold. Since shop classes and industrial arts have been eliminated from schools, young people are not discovering what it's like to work with their hands with tools. This has led to a shortage of people entering the trades. The average age of an electrician is 56. The solution is an event where tradespeople set up a booth and attendees have an experience where they use the particular trade's tools. Our first event last year attracted almost 500 people. This fall will be our second. For the future, we are developing an affiliates package where other communities will use our model to have a similar event. The Martha's Vineyard Builders Association will be our beta testing group in the fall of '24. Currently, Hatch Space in Brattleboro is our fiscal sponsor. We have applied to the IRS and will become a 501c3 with the name Trades Up in early '24.
You know, it's interesting because we had Hatch Space as our speaker for one of our virtual roundtables this past year, and we talked about woodworking as rural revitalization. And at the end, we were having this discussion, and one of the attendees asked, how can we engage youth more? And I was just kind of sitting there thinking, and I just piped up, and I hope I get this right because there is a recording, so, you know. But I said something to the effect of, well, what if we could just display somewhere and let kids actually just try things just momentarily, because you know, it just feels so impossible, so vague, until you actually touch something and try it, and then you think, I could do this. And then they said, well, actually, there's something called Touch a Trade. And so that's how we got in touch with Mason, which is really, really cool. And I'll also put in a plug for if we want youth and more diverse gender representation and all of that in the trades. My sister just finished welding school, and the equipment could not fit her body. And she got burned multiple times because nothing fit her properly. It was too heavy for her to carry around. So we really should make sure that the infrastructure is there to support diverse representation within the trades. Thank you so much, Mason.
Alrighty, moving along. Molly Howard from New Hampshire.
I'm Molly Howard, and I sit on the state rep. I'm a state rep from Hancock and Greenfield over in the Monadnock area. And our issue, in Hancock we have a new brewery, and it turns out the brewer is a genius. So I am partnering with him to create a conflict resolution software to deal with the polarization of politics. So I have this little triangle here. The solution's down here at the bottom. The issue starts here. At the top, you work on, he is going to write software to sort of churn out the discussion. So at the top, you define the issue. And as you work your way down, you get to this line where people are sort of intractable, the thing that they're not willing to give up. And from that point on, the software will churn questions back at you to find incremental steps to the solution. And at the bottom, this big circle is a compromise. And okay, I'm almost out of time. So you see, it starts with a line that goes in 2 directions. And yeah, and the line will come down to a fulcrum of a solution.
Thank you. This is why we do this, right? Like, I would never have thought of that. So I love hearing from so many different folks who aren't necessarily signed up as speakers or whatnot, but we're hearing from people who are having these ideas or these initiatives in the background, and it's an opportunity in a casual way for everyone to be able to share. So thank you so much. Appreciate that.
All right, Meg Staloff from Vermont.
So I feel like this is a perfect segue. So I work for a program called the Southern Vermont Economy Project that works across the 2 southern counties of Vermont, and I work out of Brattleboro, which is right over the bridge. So we work with a lot of communities, community projects on like getting things done. We provide training and technical assistance to help people access funding, structure community projects, and just get things done in their community, right? But the problem is we hear all the time we don't have enough people. People don't feel invited in. We need board volunteers. We need town board members. And so we invented a program called So Vermont, because we're in the So Vermont Economic Development Zone. So Vermont, get on board. And so we're going to convene people who are sometimes local leaders, but people who want to be local leaders, figure out together what people need to know. We're bringing in tons of resources and help them learn how local government works, how projects works, and get them access to these resources. So starting October 11th, if you want to know more about how we did it, just come find me.
Love that. Thank you so much. And that reminds me a little bit, and I don't know if I'm fully understanding, but it reminds me a little bit of the Kansas Leadership Center too. And so that would be a great connection. I know we've got Kansas Leadership Center folks here. All right.
Next up, Corinne Colbert from Ohio.
Hi, y'all. My name is Corinne Colbert. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Athens County Independent in Southeast Ohio. We're right there. So the issue that we saw was how to help people more fully engage with their communities and participate in public life. We created a spreadsheet of information about all the public meetings in our county, and we used that to populate a newsletter we send out every Monday that lists all the times, dates, places for all the government meetings in the week ahead, including agendas when we can get them, and how people can attend it virtually. Since then, we have expanded the newsletter to include information about community events, public announcements from government about infrastructure work, helping people avoid roads that are closing, and a roundup of relevant news from other sources around our region and our state. And we are working toward becoming a one-stop shop of public information.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think doing the beep one time really scared people into wrapping up, so thank you. I wasn't sure what noise was going to come next, so I'm very grateful. Lily, how many do we have left?
We have 3 left.
3 left. All right, and so we're right on schedule.
So we are hearing from Jules Good from here in New Hampshire.
Don't start the timer yet.
Take your time, Jules. And while they're doing that, Jules has helped Radically Rural over the last couple of years to become much more accessible. They were the original authors of our accessibility guide. They set up the sensory room for us this time. So we are super grateful for all the work that they've done to help Radically Rural become accessible.
Thanks. Okay. That helps because then I don't have to explain that part. So, hi, I'm Jules Good.
I didn't mean for an advantage there.
So, I'm a disabled person. I work professionally in accessibility consulting. Access kind of has 2 parts, physical and behavioral. And a problem is that a lot of non-disabled people don't know how to have conversations with disabled people about accessibility without making us feel really weird. And a lot of the access solutions that we can incorporate in our communities are inexpensive, but they require knowledge and some time and some commitment. For example, something as simple as not plowing snow in front of curb cuts can make a huge difference in a wheelchair user's ability to get around town. So, the solution that we started doing in Newmarket, New Hampshire, which is my hometown, is distributing educational resources via zines and flyers to local businesses, gathering community members for monthly trainings, and basically turning people into accessibility ambassadors in their community. The future is to train other disabled people to lead the discussions and provide technical assistance in their communities.
And Jules, if this career path doesn't work out for you, you can always, what are the called at the auctions when they say the collars, something like that? You could always do that. Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, next up, John Condos, also from right here in New Hampshire.
I'm John Condos. I work for Clean Energy New Hampshire, and I think we have a really great idea that should be spread all across the country. They're called energy circuit riders. We go around and support municipalities and small business to help them solve their energy problems, which usually are expenses, but we're also really reducing greenhouse gases. That's our focus. We help projects from insulating to weatherizing to building solar systems and basically saving a lot of taxpayers a lot of money. I could go on and on with all the great ideas, but you may not realize that electric police cars save $5,000 per year per car for police departments. Now, I keep talking to my police chief about it, and that's just one little example of the kinds of things that we share. And I'm working on a whole bunch of good solar projects. So essentially, it's a technical advisory service, and we just serve the state, and I think it should happen in all 50 states. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wonderful. Is this the last one? Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, Lily, last one.
All right, last but not least, Rod Sequillo from New York.
Awesome. Say excuse me.
What's good, Radically Rural? Get up. When I say re, you say late. Re. 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 Lame. One more time. When I say re, you say re. Re. Relate. Have conversations, even the challenging ones, especially those. Be willing to suspend allegiances to preconceptions, prejudices, bias. When I say re, you say pair. Re.
Pair.
Re.
Pair.
Re. Pair. Repair. Find simple ways to connect, collaborate, to care. When I say re, you say generate. Re.
Generate.
Re.
Generate.
Re. Co-create with cooperative components, moments that bring meaning, value for ourselves, for our families, our neighbors, colleagues, our world, so that our lives will be fruitfully abundant, exquisitely joyful.
Literal mic drop, yes. So I thank you so much, amazing job. I loved that yesterday when he came to check in at Connect, he was like, today was so amazing. Everything was so good, except I'm so bummed I missed the Radically Joyful workshop. I said, I'm about to make your day because it's tomorrow. And he was like, yes. And Janice is there. That was such a fun crew to see come in this morning. 7 o'clock, bright and early, bursting with smiles, radically joyful. Can't wait to hear how that went. All right, so we are right to the minute on time. You guys did amazing, thank you. So here's what we're gonna do. While I get resettled and welcome Chris Estes up here for our keynote, I want all of you to use that QR code to put in your vote. Pick one solution that you think should be the recipient of $500 of cash prize money from Good Fortune Pawn Shop. And if you're having a hard time with this QR code or can't quite get it to work, please see Lillian. I will volunteer her for this, and I will have her at the back of the room. I would love it if we could do this real quick so that we can fully pay attention to Chris and give him some undivided attention. So this is the first time we've done this. Excuse us if there's some hiccups, but we want to get our votes in early so we can pay attention to Chris. If you're having issues, see Lillian in the back. And now we will reshuffle for just a moment. Great. What, Drew Kate, did you need to say something? Drew Kate wants everyone to know that if you go and do the Dream Play Build exercise, there are prizes. And thank you, Drew Kate, for running the mic around. How on the app? It just popped up. Oh, okay. Okay, so Helen Joy, no, baby. Can you take that back to the tech team? Here, Drew Kate, take this back to the tech team, gently. Thank you. All right, and so my sister told me that also the QR code popped up on the app, so if it's not working for you to scan it there, you can also do it that way. I don't know how to describe that any differently, so if you have questions, don't ask me, ask Lillian in the back. All right. It is my pleasure to welcome now Chris Estes. Chris is the co-executive director of the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group, or CSG. His current work is centered on the policy and program implications of the Thrive Rural Framework for Equitable Rural Prosperity. Chris's previous work includes rural capacity building with the Housing Assistance Council, serving as interim executive director of the Raleigh-Wake, North Carolina, Partnership to End Homelessness, and as a senior advisor at a national network providing home repair to low-income homeowners in disaster recovery. Chris was also the president and CEO of the National Housing Conference in Washington, D.C., serving as a national thought leader on affordable housing and community development issues, including the intersection of housing with transportation, education, and health. Chris originally came to D.C. from North Carolina, where he led the North Carolina Housing Coalition, as well as worked on early childhood issues and programs serving children and families. Welcome, Chris, and thank you for being here. And that is a clicker if you need it.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to walk and talk because I do better than standing by a podium. So it's great to be with you all. I know I've been here since the first day and seen and met many of you. It's very exciting for me to be here. What wasn't in my bio is that I was actually born just down the road in Greenfield, Mass. Went to elementary school in Gill, Massachusetts. So I actually am sort of a dual citizen. I used to tell people I was bilingual, that I had lived most of my youth in New England and most of my college and adult life in North Carolina, so I could speak both Southern and New England at the same time. But it's really great to be here. I have many great memories. My father taught at a prep school called Northfield Mount Herman, and we used to bring students up to Mount Monadnock all the time, and in many fond memories of hiking that mountain as a kid. Although as a third grader, it definitely felt like it was a long way to go. So I'm going to talk with you about a variety of things that I'm going to try to connect to what's really happening in rural and resources for you. So I'm going to throw kind of a lot at you as a way to kind of generate thought and for you to dive into stuff that hopefully will help your work. If you want to click on this QR code, it'll take you to our website where you can see a lot of the resources I'm going to talk about because we really don't have time to do a deep dive. So as Juliana mentioned, I am a co-director of the Aspen Community Strategies Group. We've been around since 1985 at the Aspen Institute. We are the one program that really focuses on comprehensive community development, and 2/3 of our work historically and 100% of our work over the last 7 or 8 years has been in rural. We have a long history of working directly with practitioners to facilitate peer learning and synthesize those learnings to share with the field. We've done a lot of work with community development foundations and impact investing in rural, and really trying to be what we call a hub of hubs, really trying to identify all the resources that are happening in rural around the country and share that with folks, connect people to one another, and build and grow the field of equitable rural prosperity. So these are the topics I'm going to hit on, and it's a little odd because I'll be going from bottom to top. I realized as I put this slide together, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. But the idea is to try to connect with what we've learned about frameworks that can help folks in their work, and then connect them to what we feel like are some of the big opportunity issues for folks in rural to connect to. So if somebody asked me how would I define my sort of religious philosophy, my work philosophy, and what I think is the most important thing in rural, it really is 2 words: interdependence and interconnectedness. And I think for most folks in New England, this is probably kind of preaching to the choir, but it's really this idea that we have often thought about our issues and our communities in silos. And I mean that in the community sense too, that regionalism is hard, broader thinking is hard, and I'll go into this in more depth, but everything will try to connect back to these 2 concepts. So the first framework that CSG was a part of starting back in 2008 was this idea called WealthWorks. And it was really building off the academic research that had started in the 90s about assets and capitals, and understanding, moving from a conversation about income into a conversations about wealth and assets. And CSG came in to work with a group of practitioners to really identify these 8 to devise a framework that helped people look at their community and say, what do we have in these 8 capitals in our community? And how would we actually develop a plan for local wealth development in expanding these capitals and furthering sort of, again, from a local wealth creation, not an extraction philosophy, which is really the dominant framework in rural throughout the United States. You can find more on WealthWorks on our website, but it really became the underpinning of the approach of how we were trying to share stuff with people. The idea is that you explore from your region about how to create local wealth, identify a market opportunity, create a value chain, and build and then measure your wealth building impact from both the wealth and jobs it's created, but also community well-being. And this is a different approach. Again, it's not, we've often had the answer of like jobs were simply the problem. We need jobs. If people were employed, that kind of answered everything. And I think we've all realized, certainly in the last 20 years, that employment doesn't equal housing, doesn't equal childcare, doesn't equal health care. It doesn't solve the cost of living for a lot of people. So from that work, Janet Topolsky, who ran this program for 29 years, and Catherine Ferguson, who is now the Chief of Staff at USDA, worked on this project called our Rural Development Hubs Report. And if you remember 2 things, it's that slide about interdependence and interconnectedness, and hopefully this Hubs report, because this is really where we tried to encapsulate all the stuff we had learned about where innovation and opportunity was happening in rural. And what we realized was that there were certain kinds of organizations in rural places that made the biggest difference. And this is this and the next slide sort of go through the things that made them unique. The first thing was, and this was kind of radical at Radically Rural, was that people were thinking regionally. They weren't just operating in one local community. And I know regionally means different things in different places. A region in New Hampshire is certainly different than a region in New Mexico or Wyoming. They take the long view. Most importantly, they analyze the systems level and the gaps in the systems. They are a place where people come together, figure out what's working in their community and where the gaps are, and work to be a table to bring and bridge and build capacity to solve those issues. These collaboration as an essential way of being and doing take and tolerate risk. One of the challenges in rural is that most lending and investment strategies view rural as too risky. There's not enough economies of scale. There's not enough sort of traditional sense of assets. And so having an institution or an organization that can really understand and be one who can take that risk, because local governments are never going to be able to fill that gap. And finally, and most importantly, hold themselves accountable to the whole community. If you read this report, you can see examples from all over the country about this. It isn't one, this aren't just CDFIs, they aren't just community foundations. It can really be a whole variety of organizations and institutions. This concept and that previous work led to the creation of our Thrive Rural framework. And this is far too much stuff to try to, I could do a 2-hour workshop on this, but I wanted you to be able to see it on our website. The framework was really a work of 2 years of talking to practitioners and working groups about what had to be true to get to equitable rural prosperity. And what people told us came into being in the form of these building blocks. Each one of these is a thing that had to be true. And that we realized that we needed a local level theory of change and a systems level theory of change. Local being the things that are within the control of the community, and systems being the things that are outside the direct control but impact. We've organized these into 3 buckets that sort of talked about voice and power, aims and design, and resources. And we realized that there wasn't a building block just for equity, that we needed to have a foundational element that identified and pointed towards dismantling structural discrimination based on race, place, and class. And this is and ironically, the controversy of this element in terms of as we've rolled this out, and particularly among philanthropy, sadly, is that people don't see place as a structural barrier, particularly when it comes to rural. And the irony of this, if you sort of bridge the rural-urban gap, we have long accepted that zip code is an indicator of life expectancy in urban communities. You've spent a lot of research, particularly for communities of color, but when it came to rural, we were getting pushback from the so-called progressive left, philanthropy-serving organizations saying, well, rural people can just move. And that's a direct quote. I'm not trying to be dramatic. We literally had editors of I won't say who it was or the organization, but we've really had to push back on this. And I think it's important for folks in rural to understand that part of the challenge we have is that how people view rural and its challenges and its solutions is still in this kind of zero sum. If this isn't great for you, you should go somewhere else. Now, we've gotten into long debates about, do you understand the history of African American communities in rural, land owned by families from the time of Reconstruction? You're telling them that they've held on to this for 8 generations and they should just walk away. Like, that's an equity issue and you're not owning that. And that somewhat gets the lights to come on, but this is a big challenge. So what this framework does is it's designed to help connect issues. It's a conceptual things that need to be present. And there's a whole path that you can walk through on the website about analyzing what issue is it that we're trying to solve? How does it show up in these building blocks? Where are we doing well? Where are some things that we might be missing? How we connect with different organizations that do that work. And it's really a way to, you can take stock of the issues in your community, you can gauge progress of where you are, or you can measure impact wherever you are in that life cycle of planning and implementation. Each of the building blocks has its own a page on the website with definitions, research behind it, why it's been proven academically to sort of be important to community development, and then there's resources under it about what it looks like in action. So I'm going to hit a couple of reports and sort of try to connect this theme. So one of the challenges in rural is that the way we're asked to measure success is overwhelmingly urban biased and generally towards, I think, a deficit framework of jobs created, dollars leveraged. And that inhibits rural communities from getting the kind of investments both at the scale and flexibility that it needs. So we did a whole report called Measure Up, How to Measure Success in Rural. And the way we do these reports is we convene 30 or 40 folks in small groups of 4 to 6 people, have a discussion facilitated by emergent learning, asking this sort of what will it take question. And then we synthesize that into a set of principles and recommendations for practitioners, government, and philanthropy. So almost every issue that we've talked about and a lot of the work that I've been doing with Tony that you heard about yesterday morning really centers on this idea of how do we get the federal government to measure rural differently. And I think it also applies to state and even local concepts. I'm just going to hit a couple of high notes across this, and you can see quotes from people. You heard this a little bit if you were in the entrepreneurial track. Understanding and we include Native and tribal and indigenous communities in our rural work, and they're in every discussion we have. But this notion of success itself is really different in Native tribal communities, this idea of wealth. And Janice is one of the people that we've gotten to know and work closely with, and her work has been especially important in the recovery of the Maui fires. Her husband is actually leading the emergency management response in Maui. But this notion, she really blew us away with this idea of abundance. And I think it's an important concept, again, when you're coming from a deficit framework and thinking about what's wrong and what's missing, and you end up missing the sort of all the strengths that you're, particularly the social capital in your community. This idea that communities should have a voice in deciding what they want to measure. And I'll go back to you always end up working towards what you're measuring. So if your goals are always sort of output related, you're going to miss an opportunity to sort of push yourself into deeper work. I'll point out an example, like if you were trying to drive, for example, an economy towards outdoor recreation, which I'll talk about in a second, and the goals, the things that you measure are sort of heads in beds, number of visitors, dollars spent, but you don't measure, like, how did we change the local wealth creation within our community? You won't drive towards a local wealth creation strategy. You'll be totally built on an extraction framework. So this idea of starting where people are and understanding how to measure success from those points and this relative change is a huge issue and opportunity for rural. We can't ever win the volume game. We won't ever be at scale, but if you can show percentage change in your impact, then you can really show funders, including the federal government, the opportunities to invest in rural and see real change. I will highlight, I guess, this idea that one of the things that's always missing from almost every grant is this measure and decrease in equity. And again, there's an opportunity, especially in rural, to identify the historic inequities in rural places. These are especially true in the Southeast and Southwest with the histories of slavery and abuse of people of color and Native tribal folks. And so if you're not getting at that, you're really not addressing the foundational issues. Measuring collaboration, another radical concept, and the sense of momentum and progress is another piece that you see in the framework as well. We often get caught in rural of the spread it around strategy. Well, instead of being able to decide who's really doing great work and we should invest in, it's like everybody should get the same thing. That may be egalitarian, but it does miss out on the opportunities to really support folks who are doing the right kind of community engagement and measurement. I'll talk briefly, just a moment, about health equity and measurement. We have a report that we're working on right now that's really asking what will it take to get rural health and rural development fields to become more aligned and particularly share measurements of success. Often those things are in very different camps. Development is all about economic activity and employment. Health, maybe about well-being and reduction of illness, and those things are never linked. And if you think about the history of the kinds of development that happen in rural places, particularly in extractive communities, those things have often been at opposite and opposed to each other. And we hope to have that piece coming out in the next month or two. But this idea that we talk about health separately is a theme that I want to keep coming back to. We should never have conversations, single issue conversations in silos. Those things always need to be together. The climate, disaster, energy conversation, there's folks talking about it here. Those conversations are opportunities for different ways of thinking about community development, different opportunities to invest in community resilience. Instead of using an insurance model, we could be thinking about how is this an opportunity to do community development differently? Instead of just building back things the way they were in that sort of assurance framework, make everybody quote unquote whole, we could be thinking about what's been missing that led to the impact of this disaster being worse and invest differently. And we really want to feel like there's a huge opportunity for change there given the continual increasing in the number of natural disaster incidents. We spend more money in this country on housing from disaster recovery than we do in housing to produce more housing stock. And that's been true for 20 years. It's why all the housing organizations the field I used to work in, have all moved to disaster recovery because that's where the money is. Now just think about that for a second. We're spending all the money building back, but we aren't necessarily building back in a better way. I don't want to get caught up with that acronym, but the other piece that is a constant theme is this notion of local and regional capacity. When money came from the Biden administration over the last 4 years, most rural places did not have the capacity to do it, to take it, to apply for it, to manage it, worried about not being able to do it and being audited and, all of that stuff. Not just governments, but nonprofits. And disaster recovery, if you do it, is the idea of how could we leave this place having built more capacity? It's a unique opportunity to really invest in institutions and organizations. Outdoor recreation. Again, this conversation, there's a massive conversation happening about climate. There's a massive conversation right now in rural generally about outdoor rec as an economic driver, particularly since COVID. But those things are not happening in a community development framework, and particularly not with a rural community development framework orientation in the way it needs to be. So we did a piece on outdoor rec, really what's missing. The most important thing is, I think, first approaching from a local ownership framework. Once a place becomes successful, and you can look just across the border at the ski areas in Vermont, once a place becomes a destination, outside money's going to come in and own everything. Even if you've got local owners, the chances of those folks hanging on and staying local and selling to another local person in the community versus selling to a restaurant group or an investment group is pretty low. And pretty soon, what you've got is an economy that's much more tourism, that offers low-wage jobs for your residents, priced out of the housing market, so they're now driving further away, and all the wealth leaves the community. Most people get caught by this because they're so used to seeing a deficit and they're desperate for people to come that they don't see it. You sort of spend all this time if we can just get these people here, if this will just happen, well, this is going well. And then you kind of go over the edge and oh my God, no one can afford to live here. How did that happen? And I literally last week was in Western North Carolina at the Outdoor Economy Conference, and this was a major topic of consideration, and it's a struggle for the industry. They are having a hard time pivoting because the tourism side, the way they measure success is heads and beds. It's get people here, and they know how to market. So outdoor tourism is not marketing. It's about developing your local economy and your local ownership. It's about looking at the infrastructure you need. What kind of transportation are we going to need? What kind of childcare are we going to have? What kind of housing market do we need? And knowing that once a place becomes desirable, you're never going to be able to build enough housing to keep up with it because there's only so much land to build on, and the second home market and everything else will take over. So it's really about setting land aside to be permanently affordable. Again, not going to be a solution probably in the next 4 years where we're going to see a huge influx of federal money towards housing, so it's all going to be a conversation about land use. And I know that's a touchy subject in many New England places, as it is in many rural outdoor economy places, but that's sort of going to be our message over and over. You got to do the hard work of saying, how do we set aside land, put it in a community land trust, make sure it's permanently affordable? What's the publicly owned land we can utilize? Because once it's gone and it's built on, you don't get it back. If you aren't familiar with the Pennsylvania wilds and you're in New England, I encourage you to really check out this effort. It's a huge regional effort to develop a very rural part of north and central Pennsylvania that's the size of Massachusetts. And it's all about sort of a kind of ecotourism that's centered around local, small places with maker economies and variety of, using state parks, using people who want to tour on motorcycles and visit cute spots, like a whole gamut of stuff. And Ta's actually writing a book about this experience that I'm reading to make a quote on, but it's really an amazing story, and I encourage you to visit it. The final piece I'll mention and this is really an opportunity where the environmental movement and the economic development movement need to come together, is this idea of sustainability within how we use our natural, whether it's outdoor rec or just the natural resources of our rural places. And too often those conversations haven't happened because I think in particular the environmental side of things have seen development as the enemy. Developers were kind of running amok. We have to stop that, fight it, none of that. That's the only answer, is to play defense. And the folks who were working on affordable housing or community development were like, no, but we do need this kind of growth. We need to have something here because we have problems in our housing market or our workforce housing. And we've not come together. And I think outdoor rec and this sort of broader view of sustainability and development and trying to grow local ownership is the opportunity for that. Again, when you have those conversations in silos, you find that the enemy is us, to quote Pogo, if you're old enough to remember that. I will mention that one of the things that happens in outdoor rec, and you may not have seen this as much here, but often it becomes a situation where the people in local communities don't actually benefit from those outdoor amenities. They don't get the health benefits. It's either expensive or prohibitive or not welcoming, and this is especially true in communities of color that haven't always been welcome in outdoor spaces, usually had segregated parks, segregated beaches, segregated lakes, or lake access, and there's a long history of that, particularly throughout the South and Southwest. But this idea of intentionally planning for inclusivity and welcoming, and a sense of like, how are you going to program so that kids in your community who live there are able to participate in whatever the outdoor amenities and experience and benefits that are in your community. And again, when your focus is all about drawing folks here and generating that business income, this becomes like the 10th thing people start thinking about, and usually once you've gotten to it, it's really difficult to make it happen. So I'm going to close with some general strategies for rural. Again, interconnectedness and interdependence. We have to think about these things even within the tracks themselves, and we'll talk, Tony and I'll talk about this at the end of the day. It feels like, how do we get these conversations between these groups? People working on entrepreneurism, people working on climate change, people working on small business development or arts and culture. No siloed conversations. The conversation about rural is a big one, an important one, and we are all suffering from a bad narrative. If you imagine how the country sees rural, It is generally in the context of the opioid Rust Belt, or it's Mayberry and the perfect ideal image of the farmer and the barn. We actually have a rule at CSG, you will never see us use a picture of a barn, because we know it's not against farmers, it's not against small farmers in particular, but that image is out there. People understand that. What they miss is what downtown Keene looks like. You know, they don't see a small town. Ironically, who here watches Hallmark movies? A few. You guys are a little too elite for Hallmark. The one media source that puts rural out there in a positive light is Hallmark. And what's interesting is my wife and I would joke about this, and I kept saying, like, are they ever going to let like LGBT people Qs show up in this? And they have done that, so much so that the director of Hallmark left and started his own rival channel to keep things pure. It's called the Great American Channel. It's on your network. But that was a direct reaction to Hallmark actually showing people of color and LGBTQ people in rural having romantic connections and whatever in a rural space. It was pretty amazing to watch, but I don't dismiss it because it does shape how the way we think about rural is a problem. The way we talk about rural is a problem. My one advice is we always start with the negative. We don't feel like people are paying attention. We don't feel like, and the way we do that is we try to tell you how bad it is. Here are the numbers, here's the problem, here's what we don't have, here's how bad our outcomes are. So what I learned in the affordable housing world, because we did this all the time, was instead of getting you fired up to like, oh my God, I gotta do something about this, people go, man, that seems like a big unsolvable problem, I'm gonna move on to something else. And that's exactly what happened. We had to realize that we had to lead with solutions and we had to lead with opportunities. You gotta be honest about what we need, but we don't sell the opportunities for innovation and investment and all the great work that you and all the folks are doing across the country. Be inclusive is more than an invitation to the table. It's about building trust with people. And that's particularly whether that's new immigrants. Thank you. If you're in New England, that may be new immigrant populations. It may be people moving from other places within the US, but it's really about having a conversation. It's not about, hey, come to this meeting and give us your thoughts. It's like, what does your community need? What are the challenges? What's not working? What are your goals? What are your concerns? I had a long conversation with folks doing work in Asheville, North Carolina, and they were trying to do complete streets and bike lanes and sort of making the city more livable. And their enemy, in a sense, the people who were pushing back against them, was the African American community. And they were struggling to figure that out. And I said, well, think about it. They've been here since the end of the Civil War, and they're seeing their community gentrified and their people displaced. So when they see bike lanes, that's like, you want white people to come here and price us out. So you've got to have a conversation and understand their concerns about their preservation of their community and how this investment isn't going to create a greater displacement. And I would also, as an aside, don't ever conflate gentrification with displacement. We want our communities to be better. We want our quality of life to be better. What we don't want is for people to be pushed out. So don't get caught in that, like, the way to keep our community affordable is to keep it crappy. That's not a solution. Finally, Tony, for those of you who were here yesterday, you saw Tony's spaghetti slide of the massive chaos. There's a huge opportunity because that just got worse. All the programs that came out in the last 4 years, Tony and I were talking about, I think there's like now 34 more blocks added to that slide. We're not going to see more money, but we have a huge opportunity to try to maybe reorganize that stuff and make it less of a morass to deal with. Change the outcomes that those organizations use to give out grants and make money more accessible and usable in rural places. And I think that's a big part of how we see our work ahead. Final thing, momentum is a community development strategy, but it is the way you build community engagement. Celebrate your small wins. Think about how to keep bringing people into that sense of momentum and shared vision. Try not to have an us versus them dynamic. People have talked about the polarization in our communities, but we all generally want the same thing. Yes, there are folks that don't want stuff to change, but there is a way to bring people in a real inclusivity to help them see and feel heard that is about each time you have a little momentum and a little success, people began to see, oh, there's a reason to have hope. Most of the folks we talk to, particularly in rural communities of color, there isn't much hope. Because there isn't much momentum. You heard the story of Drew, Mississippi. Like, that's an amazing story because they built on the goals and dreams of those young people and then created a sense of momentum that then brought adults in and other folks to say, hey, this might actually go somewhere. Every rural place, and particularly communities of color, has a long history of overpromise and underdeliver. And so we really believe this sense of momentum is a key strategy, but it's a real inclusive strategy. So I'm going to stop there and thank you all for this time and the opportunity to connect with you. I want to thank Juliana and the Radically Rural staff. I told her this morning the level of curation and detail and effort of this conference is really unprecedented. You may not realize that I go to a lot of conferences, and this is by far that level of curation and ways to engage the audience is unlike anything I've ever seen, and I really want to thank you all for that.
He mentioned that this morning to me when we were sitting over there, and I said, can you put that in writing and send it to me? So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to, I know everyone's excited about seeing who won the slam, but just a couple quick announcements, and then we'll get you out of here. I would again encourage everyone to attend the closing session today at 4, right here in this theater. I can't stress that enough. All the threads, you may not realize, well, maybe you do since he just said that, but everything we do here is connected. We intentionally lay out a framework that leads from one thing to the other. So even beginning with music and poetry and the headspace that puts you in, everything we do has a reason. And so this ending is the way it is for a reason, and it will work the best if we have lots of voices together to shape and share, thank you, policy and strategy together and kind of weave all the threads that have been laid out. During that time also, we will, just like we have this $500 Solution Slam prize, we also have a $10,000 Pitchfork prize that will be given out for the Entrepreneurship Track Pitchfork Challenge that is happening this afternoon. So that's always really fun to see an entrepreneur get $10,000. And then also, we will have Terry Williams, president of the Keene, or previous president of the Keene Sentinel, and this is his last year with us. I mentioned this during the opening, and we're going to recognize him as well, and various other things. So we'd love to have you. Don't forget the Radically Rural After Party starts at 7 o'clock, I think. Double check your agendas. The bands are going to be so much fun. It's very joyous. It's very relaxed. I can't wait. So now, Slam winner announced. I have to say, all of you should feel great because everyone got multiple votes. You know what that means? All of you have ideas that are worth sharing, worth doing, worth replicating, every single one of you. So everyone should feel encouraged, and it was also a very tight race, which should make you feel even more encouraged. So I'm going to invite Roger Weinrich on the stage here to hand out the prize money. And are we ready? Let's do a drum roll. That's called clapping. No, I'm kidding. Mason Lord Touch a Trade. All right, you can go around and come on up. Come on up, Mason. All right, Mason, come around this way. $500 for Touch a Trade. Here we go.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. All right, everyone, embrace this day to its fullest. You are here right now. You don't have to be anywhere else, so enjoy it. I will see you at the closing at 4 p.m., if not before. Have a good day, everyone.